Okay, so now we're going to get to the Module 7 lab activity, actual lab quiz. I'm not going to give you the answers, of course, but I'm going to help direct you to where you need to go within the lab activity to find the answers. So the first question, it's essentially going to show you a planet and star system. And the question is it correct? Well, the best way to assess that is to go to the center of mass background page and see if what you read about center of mass makes sense with the depiction that you see in your quiz. Okay? All right, easy enough. Number two, second question is going to have to do with a radial velocity graph. And so your best bet is to go to the detection background page and scroll down to where you see the radial velocity graph as well as the image of a planet and star. Remember, how the two go together, and see if you're able to answer the question in the quiz. All right, next question is a light curve question. Essentially, you're trying to figure out the period of eclipse. And so your best bet here is the transit simulator. Again, if you didn't do it, if you didn't do the student guide, go back and do the student guide and play around with this thing and try to figure out whether you can figure out the proper section of the graph that goes along with the eclipse that you're being asked about. Okay, next question. The next question, question 4, has to do with exoplanets around massive stars. What kind of exoplanets would make sense to be around massive stars? And so your best bet is just to play around with both simulators. Do your radial velocity simulator as well as your transit simulator. And choose planets that have different characteristics, different masses, different distances from the star. Play around with the different types of stars and determine which would be the most likely or least likely. That's essentially what the question is. Okay, question number 5 has to do with, again, a radial velocity curve. So your best bet is to play around with the radial velocity simulator. Same thing with number 6. It's a slightly more complex question because not only does it deal with the amplitude of your radial velocity curve, but also the period. So again, your best bet is to play around with the radial velocity simulator. Again, play around with different size stars, different size planets, etc. Number 7 has to do with the characteristics of exoplanets. Whether they can be detected. So again, your best bet, it's very similar to question 4 actually. Best bet is to play with both simulators. Play with your radial velocity simulator, play with the transit simulator. So again, the only way you can be familiar with these simulators is by actually going through the student guide. So that's why I encourage you, before starting the quiz, go through the student guide. Otherwise, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense and you won't retain the main concepts. And let's see, number 8 has to do with a radial velocity curve, determining whether it's an eclipse or an occultation. So you can actually answer this one 2 ways. You can actually go to the detection background page, and again, take a look at this and understand it, and realize that when the planet is in front of the star, that's what we call an eclipse. When the planet is back here and the star is in front, that's called an occultation. So if you can determine that, if you can sort of figure that out from this, you can answer the question. Or if that doesn't work for you, you can always go to the radial velocity simulator and essentially set up the same thing. Remember that you can have your views, so you'll know when viewed from Earth when you're in eclipse or when you're in occultation, and see where the curve, what point of the curve you're at. And then finally, question 9 has to do with inclination. Notice that inclination is a variable both in the radial velocity simulator. You can play around with the inclination, or in the transit simulator, you can play around with inclination as well. It's an option here. So either way, just understand what inclination is and what the inclination values mean for you. And that's it. That takes you through the whole lab quiz. So good luck.